the Minister, the Deputy Minister of DCTT, the ATG, and all the representatives from the department and the entities that were on the platform, civil society structures, and fellow South Africans who may be following us in different platforms. As we officially open the meeting, I would quickly deal with the formalities. We've now confirmed that we have the necessary quorum to proceed. I would therefore, for purposes of record, before I speak to the rules, just check if there are apologies, so that we then proceed with the meeting. Committee support.
Morning, Chairperson. We have an apology for Ms. Mazoni, Chair, and Ms. Kubeka. Apologies. Ms. Kubeka as well.
May I check if there are any other apologies that may have not reached the office that members would want to place on record? If not, would indeed place those, one being that of Honorable Kubeka, who's not well and would wish speedy recovery. We also have Honorable Mazoni, who is the bereavement, and of course, on behalf of the committee, we note the life lived by the mother. Also send our sympathies to the family as we keep them until you are recognized by the chairperson. In that case, you will then proceed to unmute your mic and switch on your video camera as you proceed to speak. But given connectivity challenges, if there are such, please indicate to the chairperson for permission to switch your video camera off so as to maximize your bandwidth. We know that from time to time, there will be those that may lose connectivity and have to reconnect to the platform. Please ensure at all times that your video camera is off as you reconnect and your mic is muted, as mics are sensitive and could therefore pick up background sounds that may distract the speaker that may be on the platform and therefore interfere with the meeting. Point of orders are allowed for members in terms of the rules. Wherever you have to raise your hand on the gadget, or the committee support would assist the chair to recognize your hand. Only at that point that you would then proceed to switch on your mic, raise the point of order, and on which the chairperson could pull up on in terms of the. We also guided members that would not raise unnecessary point of orders that can collapse the meeting on this platform. With all this having been said, if we are here, we should have our meeting proceeding smoothly, and that there's quality engagement in the meeting, honorable members. I would therefore, without further ado, go to the agenda just to clarify certain points there as it gets flighted. That's the agenda for us. We've just been informed, honorable members, that the e-voting people would not be ready to come back to the committee today, and therefore arrangements will probably have to be made. For that reason, this item would not be on the agenda in that score. Honorable Minister and your team, I think in the original notice would have had the BDM, but when there was some information to the effect that the presentation would have not been ready by the time we get to the meeting, that would have been put on the side, and therefore would have relied on the overview covering that space, and if there is a presentation, you'll then continue from there before you get to the South African Post Office Amendment Bill. We now know that members have received that presentation and processed it shortly. So you'd, as you do the overview, to reflect on the PDM and how the presentation will be carried through in the committee before we get to the South African Post Office Amendment Bill. Like I said, honorable members, that's how we are going to proceed with that item out, but allowing also the PDM matter to come in, as it is an important matter, not only for the committee, but for the South Africans out there. So as I welcome you, the Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, that's leading the team, would give you an opportunity to do the overview. Once you are done, as you hand over to actual presentations, we are really gonna time there, given the other activities of the House, would want to be qualitative in that time, so that there's space for engagement as members would have read the presentations. Just immediately after your brief overview, Minister, then we'll start counting the time. Would give you a chance to present in 20 minutes the part that relates to PDM, because it is really an update. That's max 20. So if you can do less than that, that's even better. And maximum 30 to introduce the South African Post Office Amendment Bill. And thereafter, and I want members to keep their notes as they did when they read the presentations in their own time. Note those questions or comments that you want to make, so that we just deal with the presentations, get to ask questions, comments get done. When we move to the items that are more of the committee, we are able to release those that must be released and proceed as the committee to deal with our own items. Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister, I'm sure you would have planned how you approach today's meeting. It's up now. The stage is yours. Over to you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Good morning, honorable members, Deputy Minister, DG, and the team SC from SAPO and all the colleagues. I just want to clarify something, Chair, before I start. Am I understanding you to be saying I will do an overview of PDM and then there's a presentation, and then do overview of SAPO, there's a presentation, or I do both overviews and then presentations flow? If the Chair can clarify me on that.
No, thank you, Honorable Minister. I take it that first you are trying to indicate to the Chair that you may have connectivity problems and you need permission of the Chair to switch off your camera. So I accept that. But the second issue, it's really the latter is correct, that you do the overview on both and then allow the presentations to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Honorable members, as you would remember, we would have come here to present other issues, and in the process, we would have indicated that we could have given you a progress report on the PDM And we also indicated the new positive developments in that space. And we felt because those positive developments required report back to principals so that they are affirmed, we requested a week. And I'm grateful to the portfolio committee members for allowing us that. Indeed, principals have been consulted, and there was a workshop of the technicians to align a lot of things, which I am very happy to say to the committee, we seem to have found one another in quite a very inspiring way. And I would take this opportunity, Honorable Chair, to thank the technical people, TG and the team, for actually spending those 2 days to find one another and place us where we are now. Where we are, Honorable Chair, we are able now to say with confidence, no later than the end of July, broadcasting would have actually moved out of above 694 down to below 694 and above 470 and so on. And then opening up the space for telcos to start occupying that space. There's a full agreement on that. That one was not an issue. The issue was the fear of readiness by the broadcastings to fully get out of the analog and all revenue challenges that are there, and a need to do everything to make sure that as the broadcasting institutions move to digital, they move with as many viewers as possible. So I think an agreement has been reached which takes care of this phenomenon, as a result of which there's an agreement that by the end of December 31st, 2024, whatever the conditions are, there will be a switch off. In other words, the broadcasting authorities are going to move in 2 phases. Phase 1 is from above 694. Phase 2 is switching off by the end of December 2024. And they have made an undertaking to take care to actually deal with the costs that involve dual illumination. They have also taken a decision to actually accept the risks that go with the OEMs no longer having appetite to be involved in production in the direction of analog equipment. They are ready to take that risk. But in general, we are excited now that we are making a move in this regard. But a lot of work in ensuring the complete efficiency, moving from the analog, making sure that everyone, especially the indigenous people, have moved to digital. So below 694, you will have both digital and analog broadcasting authorities. And then frequencies to take care of that situation have been checked, and technical people are very happy about that. The next issue we're going to be presenting to the committee, Honorable Chair. We are aware, for instance, that SAPO is faced with dire financial and operational challenges, and the challenges which often undermine the strategic role that the post office can play in our society and economy. Of course, with the current legislated mandate and continued, sorry, Chair. I started in the wrong place. My apologies. As you might be aware, South African Post Office is a creature of statute and is governed by South African Post Office State-Owned Company Limited Act number 2022 of 2011 and Postal Service Act number 124 of 1998. in terms of its corporate governance, structural arrangement, duties, powers, and functions. Honorable Chair, the current legislative framework provides for SAPO's mandate as the provider of traditional mail services, most of which has become redundant due to technological advancement and development, and how people now communicate and do business in the digital age. Therefore, in terms of the legislative framework, SAPO has exclusivity, as we will remember, to provide reserved postal services, which include, amongst others, delivery of all letters, postcards, printed matter, small parcels, and other postal articles weighing up to 1 kg. Secondly, issuing and sale of postage stamps. And lastly, the provision of roadside collection and address boxes. As part of this universal service obligation, the legislative framework requires SAPO to provide such services to every citizen in the country, regardless of whether the post office derives financial benefit or not, and at uniform fees and charges. The fees and charges are therefore regulated by CASA and are publicly reported. Honorable members, at the time of policy formulation, the reserved postal service was aimed at ensuring that SAPO facilitates effective delivery of universal service. This was required by law and to be used as a funding mechanism that was meant to guarantee that SAPO has a revenue stream to offset and cover the loss of delivering on the universal service obligations. A postal sector market study conducted by an external service provider did reveal that there's still need for universal service obligation, as private operators would rather operate in areas that are more profitable with low operational costs. This leaves the majority of citizens, especially in the rural and underserved areas, dependent on the post office for their postal and related service needs. The study further revealed that exclusivity in providing reserved postal services in its current form and as funding mechanism for providing universal service operation is not effective. This is due to encroachment of the reserved services by unreserved private postal operators and other unlicensed operators, and the lack of enforcement by a regulator. Many of these issues, Honorable Chair, will be dealt with the amendment of the outdated Postal Service Act of 1998, which is part of the department's plan for its financial year and next financial year. As you are aware, SAPO is faced then with a dire financial, as we know, operational challenges, and these challenges often undermine the strategic role that the entity plays. Then with the current legislated mandate and continued financial and other operational challenges, it has been shown that SAPO is sustainably continues to under extreme threat, which will in turn impact on the economy and result in the job losses. In other words, my apology, SAPO's sustainability continues to be an extreme threat, which will in turn impact on the economy and result in the job losses due to the risks I've already spoken about. Part of the intervention is to review the legislative framework governing the entity to ensure that it is aligned to the current development and position and empower SAPO to digital transform. In addition, it will expand its business offerings to create more revenue generating streams by taking advantage of opportunities created by technological development. In other words, this bill seeks to assist SAPO to review the mandate and then reorganize its offerings in a manner that makes it more capable in creating more revenue and improving sustainability. SAPO's amendment bill is informed by and aligned to the number of documents, amongst others, the National Integrated ICT Policy White Paper of 2016, the Presidential Commission on 4IR report. The recently developed SAP was building the Post Office of Tomorrow strategy, which we have spoken about several times. It is also aligned to international developments where many postal operators are facing similar challenges and are being repurposed to provide diverse and value-add services. Universal Postal Union, UPU, which is a multilateral organization responsible for postal services under the United Nations, has identified critical opportunities and developed new models for member countries' operators to diversify and adopt to remain relevant and sustainable. And the revised mandate is also aligned to that. The main objectives of the amendment bill, members, is to mainly amend the South African Post Office State-Owned Company Limited Act 2011 so as to provide for the following: revise duties and expand on the mandate of South African Post Office. I already stated that. The amendment also deals with other governance provisions of the Act that were identified as problematic during implementation to ensure accountability by executive. Details will be provided in the presentation as it is going to follow. Following due processes, the South African Post Office Amendment Bill was approved by Cabinet for introduction to Parliament last year, 30 November. The details of the processes, including public consultations, while the net-like processes will be provided for in the presentation. In this regard, as I conclude, as part of the intervention to repurpose SAPO, there is an urgent need to process these amendments to align SAPO's mandate with the developments and realities of today, and leveraging its widespread network infrastructure to better serve communities and create more revenue-generating streams. It will also ensure that SAPO is guided by parliamentary statutes and is accountable to Parliament insofar as implementing the legislation that governs it. Maybe to sneak something, Chair, unless I'm not breaking the rules. We just want to indicate very soon we will be tabling here the SAPC bill, which has actually completed all the preceding processes that should happen before it comes here. I would, if you so indulge, ask the TG and the team to do detailed presentation on both these items. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I take it that you are now must do the presentation, ATG, starting with them, and then the SAPO amendment bill. It's 25 minutes now, so you can count your 50 minutes max. Thank you.
A very good morning, Honorable Chair, honorable members. Good morning to the Minister, the Deputy Minister, the colleagues from SAPO, as well as from the department present on the platform, and all others. Chair, with your guidance, 50 minutes starts now. I'm going to ask if Zayton can be given the hosting rights so that we can put up our presentation. Thank you. She will then be proceeding with the BDM presentation, Chair. As the Minister has indicated, we've had extensive engagement with all the stakeholders involved in the BDM. And we would like, therefore, to present to you our plan and approach then towards the analog switch off. In this regard, I'm going to ask if the presentation can go up, Zayton, the BDM. Thank you. And then I'd like to invite Mr. Tebuko Leshope, who's the project manager, to kindly take us through then the presentation.
Thank you, DG. Good morning, Honorable Chairperson of the committee and Honorable committee members, Honorable Minister, Honorable Deputy Minister, colleagues from various entities. Chair, we give an update to the committee in the form of this presentation as the ADG highlights. Since the last update to the portfolio committee, the broadcast digital migration process has been involved with consultations, Chairperson, in the main targeting to align the broadcasters to the objectives of the project, particularly on the analog switch-off date and the approach. Chairperson, you will recall that the Constitutional Court in its ruling highlighted that for the minister to announce then set the analog switch-off date, he has to consult the affected stakeholders and take into consideration their inputs, Chairperson. So we were doing just that to align ourselves also with the Constitutional Court guidelines. We highlight that the analog switch-off, still on the first slide, Zayton. We highlight that the analog switch-off is a critical step that will release spectrum to other operators and enable the country's developments to future technologies and penetration of broadband, as it is critical for the development of South Africa and access to information. And this process will also eventually shift the country towards full digital services, Chairperson. The stakeholders that have been engaged to consolidate the inputs leading towards the conclusion of the BDM include the telecommunications operators, your Vodacom, Cell C, MTN, and the broadcasters, the public broadcasters, public broadcaster, the SABC, ETV, the free-to-air broadcaster, and community broadcasters, those that are broadcasting television on analog. Right now, we've also engaged the signal distributor, Centec, who's primarily responsible for carrying the signals from the broadcasters through to the recipient at home. The regulator, who is also the custodian and the manager of the spectrum, is also engaged in this regard to solicit an alignment and understanding in terms of the approach and the best way to deal with analog switch-off and digital migration going forward. Next slide. In terms of the process, Chairperson, the approach has been on a consultative basis as per the Constitutional Court guidelines. We are targeting to achieve the highest alignment on ISO date to minimize post-ISO announcement tensions that could lead to further delays. The main intention is really to harmonize the views and to ensure that when we finalize and when the minister announces the analog switch-off, there is a total alignment in terms of that. The process itself, we're based on a two-stage approach, where the first approach was on written submissions. We have received written submissions, about 17. Submissions. There were a majority for ASO, but there were some dissenting views there, which we needed to get to and understand exactly what the concerns were. So the second phase dealt with that, Chairperson committee members. It was based on physical engagement with stakeholders, the public broadcaster, ETV, community broadcasters, Centec, and the regulator, mainly to solicit views and further align on the objectives and analog switch-off at the Chairperson. And some of the key issues that were raised by broadcasters during this process, the key concerns for the broadcasters related to post-COVID economic decline and impact that the STEM had on their business, Chairperson committee members. They also highlighted that the number of registered household and installed household is not sufficient to sustain their businesses. You would have recalled that we said about 1.5 million households were registered. Broadcasters are saying they were approximating around 4 million. The argument in terms of how long this period has been opened and the number that we have being the 1.5 million. and the representations being that it will be difficult to possibly base it on a number. Maybe a period could be better. And then they will also be afforded the opportunity to do what they need to do to ensure that that number is increased. The third aspect was load shedding impact on the business. The broadcasters are feeling that they do not get the same length of airtime as they used to get before COVID. And therefore, all these issues summing up to some of the issues that they say this period is not favorable for them to approach ASO in a national holistic approach that we were approaching, and therefore proposing a counter approach in terms of that. Next slide, Satan. The consultation process from the outcome point of view was quite positive, as the Minister highlights. The key stakeholders acknowledging and agreeing that ASO should be undertaking, Chair, to release spectrum for ICT development, and we should move forward with analog switch off to shift the country towards the digital domain, Chairperson. And in the main, the key stakeholders are agreeing and buying into a two-step approach, Chairperson, where step one is to immediately switch off analog above 694 to release spectrum for other telecommunications use. And then step two is to temporarily accommodate some of the high population, high impact sites, those that the broadcasters believe that will still give them an opportunity to grow numbers and sustain their business within a given period, Chairperson. This two-step approach, Chair, is deemed to be a viable approach for the broadcasters, and it has been tested technically through the workshops and various meetings, and it has been motivated strongly as a win-win approach that will enable analog switch off progress. It will release spectrum. It will allow the broadcasters to recover from post-COVID and load shedding impact, Chairperson. Next slide. In the next few slides, Chairperson, we're giving an update in terms of the other key focus areas and the activities that we would have been undertaking throughout the project, as you would have been receiving previously. This slide provides an update in terms of the awareness programs that we are undertaking and will be undertaking going forward to ensure that there is greater awareness as far as digital migration is concerned. We have categorized our approach into the radio and television platforms approach, the direct and physical engagement approach, the online and print. And we have listed all the individual activities that we undertake under each of them, and the radio and television being key messages in all 11 languages through radio and television, public and community. And then also through the direct and physical, where we engage the communities through registration centers, provincial imbisos by ministers and officials. We've also consulted with SALGA and House of Traditional Affairs and Quezon, and the community outreach programs there. And then online, the National Gazette, social media published FAQs and posters and pamphlets there, Chair. And then in stepping in towards the analog switch off process, Chair, we are going to intensify in terms of the awareness. The SABC has developed and finalized the awareness campaign proposal. SABC and USASA is processing this a proposal targeting to roll out more campaigns in preparation for ASO, Chairperson. Next slide. In terms of the total registrations, Chairperson, since the beginning of the STB registrations in 2015, a total of around 1.5 million applications have been received and registered. These numbers include a number of registrations for the extended period of 30th September 2022, and the period between July and 2022 has brought about 178,300 new registrations. That's what we recorded. And Chair, we've also been looking at the number of applications post the 30th of September. And we have recognized for the period October 2022 to the 30th of May that we have recorded 127,000 new registrations. So registrations are continuing though at a slower pace, and we are processing about 3,000 applications. To this effect, Chair, we have finalized the process to also cater for the late applications. Chair, we do believe that even during switch off, those late applications will come through. The nature of technology adoption, you have laggards who will only respond once the services are deprived, so we are catering for those. This is necessary, Chair, to ensure that the indigent household that registers late are provided for during and after ASO, Chair. Next slide. In terms of analog switch off, Chair, since the last update, because we were working on the consultations and the framing how we are going to handle ASO going forward, there hasn't been much, a lot of analog switch off. There was just one site that was switched off in the Western Cape. The Frabo site was switched off by the minister during the month of May, Chairperson. And then in the main, during the past year, the progression has been a lot more on the ETV side, bringing their total number of sites to 30. They have about 94 sites, so it's about 1/3 of their site that has been switched off. They will be switching more sites in the step approach on above 694, and the SABC will be doing the same. Chair, we just updating the committee that in the provinces where services have been switched off, reorganization of the spectrum to release the above 694 spectrum has been concluded. The same will happen once the above 694 has been concluded, so that we can totally release spectrum to the telcos above 694. Next slide, Zayton. This summarizes progress in terms of analog switch off. As you can see here, the amended CSN services, they have fully implemented analog switch off across the country on their network of 84 transmission point. The SABC with majority analog switch off and fully concluding the 5 provinces. They will be switching off more services above 694 in the next few months. And then ETV has switched off 30 of the 94. They'll also be switching off some sites the next few months, and then the rest below 694 will be terminated in the following period. The community broadcasters, majority of them will be under 694 band, as the minister highlights. So they do not own a large network. Each community broadcaster, in most cases, own about 1 transmission point. It's just 1 TBN with multiple transmitters, but they do not exceed 5 points. So therefore, then they will, for this period, based on the scale of their business, still be accommodated below 694. Check. Next slides. This next few slides, we're just capturing progress made in terms of the 4 remaining provinces, Chairperson, with regards to the number of registered households and progress made with installations, and therefore reflecting those number of sites that would have reached a switch off threshold as engaged with the broadcasters, Chairperson. So the work continues in terms of installations of set-top boxes in the provinces. Next slide, Satan. A summary in terms of the Eastern Cape province. The province has a total of 33 sites, where we at now 12 sites were ready. So at the end of last week, they've reached the threshold switch off. There's work continuing, targeting to get most of those sites to reach the threshold by the end of June. Next slide. And then the next province is Western Cape. As you can see, progress is quite more significant compared to the Eastern Cape. There's just more sites that has reached thresholds there. And then the remaining sites work is still continuing there. If you could move to the summary slide with regards to Western Cape, Zayton, where we're saying of the 35 sites, 25 sites have reached the thresholds, and I think you're on the wrong slide. We're still on the Western Cape, Zayton. Thank you. 25 of those had already reached the threshold site as at the end of last week, and the remaining sites are receiving work activities to conclude that. Next province. And then the KZN province, also with different statuses there, and work being undertaken to ensure that those sites and towns reach the threshold. Move to summary slide, please. Where we are saying 26 of the remaining sites to be switched off, 12 of those were ready for switch off, and 9 of those were above 694. As already at this stage, we were looking at this option of a two-stage approach. The next province. Gauteng, in the main, in terms of the threshold for installations, we were quite satisfied, Chairperson, and the province were generally ready, and from there. However, as we were saying, that the broadcasters are looking at these numbers holistically to say those numbers in total that have registered are not sufficient to sustain the business. Instead of this 1.5 that we are measuring and reporting against, they're hoping for numbers to above 2 million towards 4 million. The SABC did specifically highlight that at least over 2 million will be sufficient for their business. So those are some of the issues that we were considering. Next slide. In the workshops and developing the final approach, Chairperson. You can move to the next slide, Zayton. There are some issues that are affecting the activities on the ground, Chair, committee members, in terms of the installations and rollout of set-top boxes and some of the activities that are project-based. Load shedding is one of those, Chair. How we're working around this issue is to extend the working time and maximize performance during a period where there is energy there. And then there was also issues of logistics with SAPO. This matter is being attended to by the department. There was significant improvement during the last week in terms of this regard. So the department and USASA is working on this particular issue, Chairperson. Next slide. Chair, in terms of the conclusions and way forward, the consultation process have yielded positive results, as we are highlighting. We are therefore then targeting to finalize and gazette the analog switch off during this month, this week, in fact. And these are some of the activities that will be undertaken to ensure that the two steps that we have highlighted as preferred steps by the key stakeholders in the industry are successful and materialized. Broadcasters will submit the frequency amendments to ICASA, as the regulator will be withdrawing some of the frequencies above 694 and allowing for temporary accommodation below 694. This is a process that needs to be fulfilled. It's a requirement by regulations. And then the Joint Spectrum Advisory Committee, which is a prescribed committee to oversee these issues in terms of the regulations, will review and then submit to council for council to process. And then the analog switch off awareness will continue, and the messages will be flighted on transmission networks to make the households aware. And the batches of those that are scheduled for analog switch off and some of those high impact sites that the broadcasters have requested retentions will also be managed and reallocated during this period. The step 2, the plan is also finalized. Technical analysis are concluded, Chairperson. What we are doing right now is just to get the broadcasters to formally sign off and commit on the undertakings they have made at both the workshops and the steering committee meetings in terms of the approach, where after the minister will announce the analog switch off Chairperson committee members. And it is our strong view, Chair, that having considered the economic conditions submitted by the broadcasters and the industry, sustainability of each of the parties, Chairperson, that participated in the consultation process, and other factors that were raised during this process, Chair, including the need to release the spectrum for other uses, we believe that this step approach is a win-win approach for the sector, Chairperson. It brings certainty to the market, certainty to the sector, particularly with regards to release of the spectrum for other use, Chairperson. And the approach has buy-in from stakeholders, and we believe that the post-announcement tensions are managed through this process and are now comfortable to move forward, Chairperson, in terms of the announcement of analog switch off. Thank you. ADG, back to you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chair, that was the presentation on BDM. May I be guided? Would you like us to pause to take on the question?
No, sir, you'll proceed, and then members are taking notes. We'll then engage after.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. And now we will then proceed on to the SAPO Amendment Bill. May I then request again, Zayton, if you could kindly put the presentation up. Thank you very much. With regards to the presentation, I will invite my colleague, Ms. Timakato Mojela, to kindly take us through the presentation. As Minister has indicated, we would like to present or table the South African Post Office Amendment Bill to Parliament for their consideration. And our presentation basically would look in terms of the strategic focus, as well as the objectives for the amendments. We would also highlight the processes that we conducted, as well as then the comments that we received from public and our responses as the department. And for that, I would like therefore to invite Mr. Magaso Mojela to kindly then take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, DG. Good morning, Honorable Minister, Honorable Chair, Honorable Deputy Minister, Honorable members of the portfolio committees, DG, CEOs, and the executives and colleagues. Good morning once again. I'll be taking you through the presentation on the SAPO Amendment Bill. If I may be allowed, Chair, to switch off the camera.
Permission granted. Proceed.
Thank you. So, Honorable Chair, as the Minister has already touched on a lot on the first few slides of the presentation with regards to the background, the rationale for the amendment. If I also may be allowed, Honorable Chair, so as not to repeat what has already been covered when the Minister was actually providing an opening remarks. We can then start on slide 8, if you may allow, as the minister has already touched a lot on the background and the rationale for the amendment of the South African Post Office Act, Chair.
Chairperson, the slide for Z10 is not visible.
You see now, Honorable Mlala?
Not from my side. I don't know from your side. From my side,
Yeah.
it's still.
From the side.
The slide is on, Chairperson.
Yeah, I see also from my side. Honorable Mlala?
No, mine is not visible, but it's okay. We can proceed.
Yeah, it
because
may be on your gadget. Yeah, you can proceed.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start on the processes in the development and finalization of the South African Post Office Amendment Bill. So this is a process that started in the previous financial year, where we had extensive consultation with the South African Post Office and National Treasury. That looking at the current legislation that that is governing the post office, and because it was at that time when the South African Post Office was actually seeking financial assistance in terms of their sustainability, as we all know that they've been going through financial challenges lately. So it was at that point that we needed to, as we address all these other challenges, one of the issues that we needed to look into is the legislation that is governing the South African Post Office. So the amendment were then developed initially in consultation with SAPO and National Treasury, and thereafter it was presented to the cluster and working together with the chief state law advisors for legal drafting. We also engaged as we were developing the CS report that goes along with the amendment, engaged the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation in the presidency to ensure that we align on the CS report and the rationale for all the amendments that we are making to the South African Post Office Act. So the following publication of the amendment bill, the department was called by NEDLAC to do a thorough presentation as part of the consultation processes to allow and enable NEDLAC partners and their social partners to make preliminary input. So furthermore, on the 1st of September, NEDLAC convened a capacity building workshop where the department formally tabled the revised SAPO amendment bill that incorporated the public public inputs. So during consultations with NEDLAC, business constituency of NEDLAC also requested that the department have bilateral with them so that they are also be given an opportunity outside the inclusive NEDLAC partners to make their further their inputs, and that was done, and all the issues that were of concern were clarified. If we can move to the next slide, please. So we continue to engage at NEDLAC level. Hence, we also held a meeting on the 14th of September and also on the 7th of October, where the bill was we went through the bill clause by clause to ensure that all parties are satisfied with the amendments that that were proposed. So following those consultations, NEDLEC actually supported the amendment, and it was even further indicated that this is something that was sort of long overdue, so that we address all the challenges that the entity that is SAPO is facing. So they supported the amendment bill, and the detailed report on those were submitted to the department. So we further received other inputs from private stakeholders, one of them being the South African Express Parcel Association, which is SAEPA, and this is an industry association representing over 100 courier operators that are registered in terms of the Postal Services Act. We also received input from takealot.com group, which is also an unreserved postal operators registered under the Postal Services Act, and also received inputs from the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, which is the regulator for the sector, and also received written inputs from the South African Post Office. If you can move to the next slide, please. So following those comments, we then revised the bill incorporating the feedback that we actually received on the consultation processes, and then revised even the CS report, and consulted furthermore with the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor on the revised bill that then had inputs from the stakeholders. So, and then we moved on to process the bill through cluster and through cabinet, so that it is approved for introduction into Parliament. And that was done. It was approved by cabinet on the 30th of November 2022. Following which, the bill was then submitted to the National Assembly, and the Speaker and the Chairperson of National Council of Provinces as required in terms of the rules of Parliament. And that was done in February for processing through parliamentary processes. So again, following that, the department continued to engage the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor and the Parliament's Bill Office in finalizing and certifying the bill for submission to Parliament committees, and hence the bill was then tabled to this portfolio committee. So with regards to the stakeholder comments, and if we can move to the next slide, please. If we look at the comments and response to, just to highlight some of the comments that were received, as I indicated, that SAPO, ICASA, and NEDLEC generally supported the amendments to revise and expand on the mandate of the South African Post Office, and their inputs were mainly aimed in enhancing the amendments to ensure alignment with the intentions of the bill, as well as those of the postal, that of the Postal Services Act. So their inputs were incorporated as it sought to improve on the amendment. Where there was a bit of a challenge was with the private operators, as I indicated, SAEPA, that represent over excuse me, that represents over 100 courier companies, and Takealot Group, where actually agreed that the mandate of the South African Post Office can be expanded, but they did not concur that it should be done through legislative amendments. So their comments were actually restricted to those provisions which amended section 2, 4, and 7 of the Act. And they argued that the amendments were not necessary, as their mandate was already provided for in terms of the law of the reserved and the unreserved postal services, and that nothing prohibits the South African Post Office from actually doing what the proposed expanded mandate it's saying they should be doing. And instead, they also further called for the amendments of the Postal Services Act to remove the reserved postal services that currently, in terms of the law, there's a reserved postal services that only the South African Post Office can deliver on in terms of their mandate. So they are advocating that that particular provision should actually be removed, as we all know that this is something that is a matter of course. So, but yeah, that was some one of the input that they that they recommended should happen. So they were further concerned that they are worried that this may simply be a precursor to a wide and overreaching amendment of the Postal Services Act, which may seek to exclude their members from providing courier and logistics services to specific customers, such e-commerce businesses, government entities, and SME, and so ultimately creating another monopoly to benefit and favor the South African Post Office. If you can move to the next slide, please. So as government, we then responded to those concerns that were raised and saying, indeed, this amendment, this is an act that is governing an entity and not the sector. So and it's not the intention of government to actually create a monopoly in favor of SAPO on the expanded mandate provided in the bill, and that the objectives of the bill was clarified, and it was just to ensure that SAPO as a creature of statute with a legislated mandate, and that legal framework needs to be updated in line with the development and updated mandate to ensure that they are operating in a space that is aligned with the current development. And it has nothing to do with putting it as a precursor to make sure that that mandate that we are expanding on will then be saying that only SAPO can provide such. So we clarified that, and that we also as government wanted to ensure that SAPO is empowered by legislation governing it to provide services that are relevant and will ensure financial sustainability of the entity. So our concern also was that as private operators, it will obviously be in their interest for the status quo to remain in terms of the legislative framework that is governing SAPO, and hamstrung SAPO in as far as providing basic postal services is concerned, and at a regulated cost as per their comments. And we were saying that this is something that as government, it cannot be acceptable. They are allowed to do as they wish because they are not governed as businesses, as entities by a legislation. So we needed to update the legislation that is governing the South African Post Office to ensure that it's relevant with the current developments. If you can move to the next slide, please. So this is more of the detailed amendments in the bill. So clause 1 deals with the amendments and insertion of definitions, and that is that are used in the bill just for better understanding and easy of interpretation. And then clause 2 deals with the amendments of section 2 of the Act, and we just inserted new objectives under paragraph F and G, and therefore the objectives as just to expanded to ensure that the post office is not only empowered by legislation to provide basic postal services, but it's also to provide other value-add services and expand on its revenue generating streams, and also for SAPO to position itself as a facilitator in the provision of government services as provided for in the National Integrated ICT White Paper. So clause 3 seeks to amend section 4, And this is the crux of the amendment, where it deals with the expanding the mandate of the South African Post Office, so as to legislate more services that SAPO can venture into to ensure relevance and sustainability. So the amendments are therefore to empower SAPO to refocus and expand on its mandate to provide logistics e-commerce services, serve as a logistic partner for e-commerce and other logistics players, including SMMEs and even informal traders, serve as a digital hub for business communities, serve as a designated authentication authority that fulfills its role as a national trust center in the age of digital era, in the age of digital identity and services, and also serve as a hub for government services and other agencies through which citizens and business can access those services. You can move to the next slide, please. So the section was further is to empower SAPO to venture into any other business that is responsive to the needs of users and consumers. It can also forge partnerships with the other stakeholders to ensure sustainability. Obviously, this we're saying that it should be subject to the approval of the minister. So the section was further amended to provide for SAPO to charge different fees for different services in certain areas with the approval of the regulator. And this is to ensure that SAPO is able to recover costs of providing the services and not operate at a loss, as we currently know that the charges that the South African Post Office can charge must be uniform regardless. So we are saying that they may be different, differentiated charges for different services, and that should be allowed in terms of the law. But of course, they need to be those will be in consultations with the regulator to approve on those. And then that section is further amended to allow for the post office to differentiate its service offering at different service points and post office based on the need assessment for a particular area. This is to ensure also that the effective and efficient usage and enhancement of the service offering by SAPO to communities. So assessing the needs will assist to ensure that a certain post office over and above the services that should be provided for in all the post offices, but can identify this particular outlet. These are the services that this particular community would actually appreciate. So we are providing to allow the post office to be able to do that. So if you move to clause 4, this clause provides for the amendment of section 7 to make it clear that the normal expenditure of the South African Post Office to ensure universal postal services as required and any other service to achieve its mandate may be funded by Parliament out of money appropriated for that purposes. And this is to ensure that funding, if given, it's only provided for services that SAPO is required as part of their social obligation. Even though it may not be financially beneficial to the post office. And this is currently something that is happening where SAPO is required to provide services to everyone in the country, regardless of whether they derive financial value or not. Whereas as the postal market study that was conducted by the department indicated that many of the postal operators, private operators, will rather operate in areas that are financially making sense to them, and this will lead to many other communities being excluded if there's no universal services obligation that the South African Post Office is currently carrying. So the provision was further enhanced to provide for all spheres of government to utilize the post office infrastructure in the delivery of their services wherever possible. And this is to set aside certain services to be provided by the South African Post Office. If you can move to the next slide, please. And the intention of this amendment to use the post office infrastructure that is the government owned to deliver the service to community, thereby ensuring that essential services are delivered to communities without having to travel distance to access those services. So we are saying that this is an infrastructure that is already there. So if there can be multiple services, government services that communities can just walk through the post office and be able to transact as many services as possible. So we are saying that, and this will also assist in terms of making sure that the post office infrastructure is maximally utilized, and it also benefits the post office and not over rely on government for funding and bailouts from time to time. And this will also assist to offset the universal service, sort of cross-subsidize the universal services obligation, where post office is it's actually mandated to provide services that are not financially sustainable, but they are required to do so, as now they are entrusted with the universal services obligation in the country. So in this regard, we are saying SAPO should be seen as an extension of government and be considered as the preferred supplier for certain services, especially in the rural area, where a combination of post office services and government services will ensure full service housed in a single operation. And as I indicated, it will then contribute in eliminating over-reliance on government funding for universal services obligations. Can move to the next slide, please. So clause 5 seeks to amend section 8. Here we are saying we are actually reducing the number of non-executive members of the SAPO board that the minister can appoint to from 10 to 9, and also provide a minimum of 5. And we are saying that given the financial challenges that SAPO is facing, this is to ensure that a minimum number of board members is kept to ensure savings where possible, but even though and do away with any excessive cost. And the revised number will also assist to break even deadlock during the board meeting. And the revised number, as we have been in terms of consulting other stakeholders, were a guarantee that it's sufficient to ensure effective functioning of the South African Post Office and the board. If we can move to the next slide, please. So under clause 6, we are providing for the amendment of section 11. There we are deleting subparagraph C of subsection 4 to remove the need to have banking skills, as this was made in line with the post office as the shareholder of the post bank, and provision requiring the post office board members to be represented in the post bank board. So as you know that that decision has since been taken, that a South African Post Office will no longer be the shareholder for the South African Post Bank. So the section is further amended by the deletion of subparagraph AI, which compels the minister to appoint 2 nominated union members to the board. And it has been shown during the implementation of this particular provision that in some instances, the unions will make nomination of members who are not qualified in terms of the act to be nominated as board members, and this takes longer in finalizing the process, wherein the the names that are submitted are of people without the necessary skill. And this is just to ensure that we're expanding on that to ensure that that provision to ensure that the unions should nominate and submit the names of individuals who have the necessary and the requisite skills as outlined in the law. So just to enhance, to make sure that not to have delays in appointment of the board due to the back and forth between the department and the union reps in as far as nominating the correct people is concerned. So we just wanted to expand on that to ensure that there's skill. It's the nominations are of people with the necessary skills. So we also have amendment to subsection 8A of that of section 11 to provide for a more simplified processes in terms of filling the vacancies due to resignation or disqualification without the need, and removing the need for a nomination committee, as this might take longer. This is the process where if a board member resigns, there's no need anymore to have a nomination committees and follow through the same process if it's an appointment of a new board, just to make it effective in ensuring that the process of filling of vacancies created due to resignation or disqualified is not as cumbersome. Can move to the next slide, please. So the section is further amended to empower the minister to review appointment of any board member at an annual general meeting. So in the shareholder compact and King's Report, there's a clause that commits the board to conduct annual performance assessment of each board member and also the organizations that it oversees. And those, we are saying that based on those amendments, on those assessments by the board and presented to the minister for any reason as provided. So we are under section 10 and 13. We are saying that the minister will be allowed and empowered in terms of this amendments to initiate the removal process of any board members who are not fulfilling their fiduciary duties. And this is also to make sure that the board is more effective in executing their fiduciary duties and not wait to say, I'm appointed for 5 years. Then those annual assessment will allow for accountability to the minister. Clause 8 seeks to provide for the insertion of these are new sections, sections A to 14A to 14A to 14E. And this is firstly to provide for the appointment of the STEM advisory committee members by the minister, processes to be followed in the appointment of the STEM advisory committee members, the composition thereof, and then the eligibility to be appointed and the functions of the STEM advisory committee member and the disqualifications and removal thereof. So this is a committee that serves within the post office, and it's been years since they have been appointed because of the legislative vacuum on the appointments in terms of office. There's no legislative framework that provides for the appointment and that governs this STEM advisory committee, and the National Integrated ICT white paper provided for such. So we are just inserting those new provisions to make sure that there is a clear processes in as far as the appointment of the STEM advisory committee is concerned. Can move to the next slide, please. Under clause 9, we provide for the amendment of section 17, subsection 1, and this just to clarify that the performance contract of the chief executive officer is concluded with the board and not with the post office, and as it currently provides, and then just to remove the reference to the post office and replace it with the board as it were. So these are just clarifying amendments to make sure that where we use the word post office, is not actually the post office. We are saying it is the board, and also it has been amended to remove reference to the CFO and the COO, as only practically the CEO concludes performance agreements with the board, and the others will conclude with the CEO. Under clause 10, we provide for the amendment of section 25, subsection 1, and subsection 3, that deals with the interventions of the minister in there. We also just replace the word post office with the board to make it clear that the board is the board that interacts with the reports to the minister and ensure that the board is held accountable. You can move to the next slide, please. So this is another section that section is further amended. Here is just to increase the terms of office for the administrator. In that section, it provides for the appointment of an administrator in cases of challenges with the board, or if there's a need for the appointment of an administrator. But in that particular section, it says that the administrator should be appointed for a period of 3 months. And we've realized with experience where the administrator was appointed for the post office some years ago, that 3 months is actually not enough for an administrator to do anything. So we are just saying that we are increasing that term period from 3 months to 12 months, and for the minister to report to the National Assembly within 8 months, and not limited to the few months that are provided for in the current legislation. We are saying that the current 3 months is not reasonable and sufficient to ensure that the administrator is able to develop and implement any turnaround strategy or plans required in instances where the board is dissolved. So if can, Honorable Chair, Minister, this is in conclusion to say that with its widespread network infrastructure, SAPO should be legally empowered and be positioned to continue to play a critical role in providing multiple services to community that responds to the ever-changing needs of customer, businesses, and citizens, as indicated in the amendment bill, thereby ensuring their financial and operational sustainability. The bill will further ensure that it is guided by a statute and is accountable in as far as implementing the legislation that governs it is concerned, and to ensure that there is an effective monitoring tool in the implementation of the Act, and not to be obfuscate with the current legislation which limits its mandate. Therefore, we'll then recommend that the PCC supports this amendment for further processing. That will conclude my presentation, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you, DG.
Thank you, Timaka. So we are back to you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister and the team. I see that you really tried within time, which is good. It allows space for engagement. But as I'm going to identify members who would want to speak on the two presentations, I just want to remind members in relation to the bill that as it comes before the committee and introduced by the department, it is now a bill that the committee should be able to use to engage the public, which therefore says that our engagements will be probably more of clarities as we make comments on it, with an understanding that it's a matter that still needs to go out for the public, and there's a reasonable expectation that this being our process will also be open-minded in terms of what comes out of the public participation process. So I just thought it's important to make that quite clear right in the beginning, as I check for those that want to make inputs. The committee support will also assist me in case I do not see and I do see the hand of Honorable Podlani. That's one I see on my side. Any other hand from committee support side?
No, Chairperson, that's it.
Let's do that just for purpose of record.
Mr. Molana, okay? Mr. Molana.
Let's record, for purpose of record, let's record Honorable Machozi's apology, which has put on the platform, as well as Honorable Bambo's apology has been forwarded. So we're placing those on record. We'll then proceed to Honorable.
Honorable Chairperson, I am here.
Oh,
I'm using a different gadget, yes.
Oh, so Honorable Machozi is back. Because we got an apology forwarded. We now have, I see that is your hand about clarifying up the presence, or you will also want to be one of the speakers to be identified, Honorable Machozi, just for clarity?
I'm the one with iPad, Chairperson. I have not set my gadget to Z Majo's, but yeah, that's me.
Yes.
I've raised
You
my
want to
hand
be
with iPad.
okay? Yes, that's what I wanted
Yes.
to get. So
okay, thank you.
we do have Honorable Potlani, Honorable Machozi, and Honorable Mlala. That order.
Can I go?
Potlani, proceed.
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Minister, Deputy Minister, colleagues on the platform. Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, on the BDM, I think I get a sense that there is no appreciation. Perhaps it is just something I also need to investigate further in terms of the impact of load shedding. I think load shedding has been detrimental to everything, every sector within the economy. And I do appreciate Mr. Shoka's presentation, which speaks to them working around the load shedding schedule. But also, I don't quite clearly get what this means on what are the cost implications, because he has spoken to people working overtime or extended hours, and just so that at least the project is moving. And can I please ask him to elaborate on what he means when he says SAPO logistics challenges? Because we cannot treat the issue of SAPO in isolation as we prepare to do with the SAPO amendment bill, and where the bill is proposing that provincial and municipalities should be encouraged to use SAPO. But if SAPO is going to then be a challenge on the issue such as BDM, I would really appreciate him expanding on that to say what does he mean? And also considering that we are now in rain season, I did not quite get how that is going to affect this, especially considering that this really is a matter of a court process. Chairperson, on SAPO, I would like for the department and the minister, when they next speak to the committee, to really balance me at least on the issue of SAPO being a necessary service provider in the rural areas, but also the department speaking about closing down SAPO offices that are not financially viable. I am failing to find the balance and to see how the department consolidates that, because it is one thing to say you are closing one particular SAPO. For example, I was reading the questions yesterday to say in Benoni they're closing a SAPO office because it is not viable. But then you speak about it being a core service to communities. It's not quite clear what criteria SAPO uses to close the respective branches. And if we are going to now talk about the amendment bill, and the amendment bill which also speaks about different pricing criteria for different locations, I think that is a very slippery slope, and it is going to just perpetuate the imbalance and perpetuate the imbalance of service and the imbalance of prices. I'm not sure if I totally agree with that. On the issue of the STEP Advisory Committee, how urgent is the minister treating it? I do appreciate that it is part of the amendment bill, but how urgent is this? How necessary is it, considering the financial constraints that SAPO faces? And on the bill, I think we will as we get into the bill, we will then speak to what I think is, again, too much power that the minister is given in terms of the removal of board members, but we'll have that conversation when the time is ripe. And Chairperson, maybe from my side, your guidance on what shape and form the public participation is going to take. I can't remember how this is tagged. Is it going to, are we going to do it the same way that we did with the post office bill, or will the committee be going out to communities? I think that would greatly assist me. I will stop there, Chairperson. Thank you.
Honorable Bolan, and I recognize the Honorable Machozi. Please proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, the Minister, DM, and all honorable members. In terms of the analog chair, I wanted to check because when they were presenting, they spoke that the court has ruled that they must engage with other stakeholders and before they then switch off and go straight to digital. My apologies. I wanted to check, Chairperson, that did they not do these engagements before? And were they not consulted all these other stakeholders that are complaining of switching off analog and going to digital? And also with the fact that as much as they have given us all provinces on how are they going to switch off in terms of when they are above 694 and or below 695. What did they not do a survey before maybe introducing going to digital to make sure that we know of which areas will be affected? And because now this report that we're getting, it's giving us challenges that are there in the system. And as well, what is the time frame for areas that are below 695 that won't go straight, that won't be switched off to analog and go straight to digital, that will need phasing? What is the time frame of that phasing? And also, when they said there's a part at the end when they speak of challenges and they point out what SAPO would need to do. I don't know where I now put my comment. Where is that comment? It can't do this to me. Oh yes, there it is. Challenges of slow run in the province to SAPO logistics challenge. What is the SAPO logistics challenge? have to do with, unless they expand and explain furthermore, what is it that they mean when they speak of SAPO logistics challenges? Because then I would have to understand what role is it playing, when what exactly are they talking about, maybe, or dissemination of something, or what is happening. But yes, I would like to know about that, Chairperson. And also in terms of SAPO, I'm partly covered by you and Honorable Podlani, and that obviously will still go to public hearings and make a conclusion of the bill ourselves. And but I'm worried, Chairperson, when they say SAPO must expand its mandate in terms of objectives, but at the end of the end user is still affected because of there are offices that are closing. And so what are we expanding on? And so I am finding a difficulty there in understanding that we are expanding in our objectives of SAPO mandate, but at the end of the day, what is our objective? Because it's at the end user, and if there are offices that are going to be closed by SAPO, then what are we expanding on? So those are the two questions I have, Chairperson. I think other clarities we'll get them when we go to these consultations with the public in terms of the bill. But yes, that's all for now. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Machozi. I now recognize Honorable Mlala. Let's proceed.
Thanks, Chairperson, and good morning to the Honorable Minister and the Deputy Minister, and then good morning to colleagues in the Portfolio Committee. Now, thanks, Chair, and let me first appreciate the presentation by both the project manager for Centec, the minister, and the ADG. It's highly appreciated. I just have some few questions that I needed clarity on. The first one, it relates to BDM. You have presented a two-step approach. You referred to it as a win-win situation. But from where I'm sitting, you said the first step will be below 694, and then the second step will be above, obviously. Now, does that suggest that you don't have a specific date where you specifically going to announce the migration, or you're going to have two announcements, the first phase and the second one? If you can clarify that for me, I think that will be good. And then maybe I'll come back to BDM. Let me go to SAPO. SAPO, on your clause 7 amendment, you are literally requesting that the Treasury should fund the universal service obligation, which is almost similar to that of the SABC. So you're having the public mandate where you're saying these areas, in particularly rural areas where these private operators are not there, you are obliged by the mandate to provide services. Now, I don't know, but my question would be, are you not going to have a situation where government is just funding, and then there's there's another arm of SAPO, which is profitable, which does not cross-subsidize. What is the balance between the two? If I could be clarified, so that we know that yes, we agree that the public mandate must be funded, but it must not be abused, so that everything else is public mandate, and then people are making profit on the other side, which is the commercial arm. And maybe if that can be clarified as well, so that we understand, we are not necessarily opposed to a universal service obligation, because it's in our interest that the ordinary people must have access to services of SAPO. However, we don't want a situation where management then deliberately leave that service. It collapses, it's not functional, but year in, year out, Treasury should put money there. So maybe if you could clarify the two, so that we are clear. Now, the second issue, which is related to the first question, what will be then the strategy to balance competition regarding SAPO and other operators in terms of this bill particularly? Because as much as we want competition, but we want our people to, how do you balance that? Because most of these operators are operating in metropolitan areas. And then, so the state will be left to deal with the non-profit universal service obligation. And then the last question with regard to SAPO would be then, what is then the relationship between this bill that we are working on and the Postal Services Act? Because I remember there was a big debate sometimes ago where SAPO was complaining about private operators encroaching on their universal service mandate. And I don't know if this bill then addresses those issues. And perhaps if you could clarify the relationship between the two, what are the implications? If we amend this bill, does it then suggest that the Postal Services Act by implication is amended? Or we're still going to come back and look for an amendment for the Postal Services Act? So I think if you could clarify that, perhaps I would be able to make a follow-up. Thanks, Chair.
Chairperson, please note me.
Lala. I didn't hear that.
It's Bodlani asking to be noted, Chairperson. I don't know why my hand went down.
Okay, probably they thought it's Elka's hand because you would have spoken. So let me probably give to you before I give to Honorable Kumbu to complete your point.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chairperson. Chairperson, on the minutes of the last meeting, it records that a socio-economic impact assessment system report will be presented to the committee before we start entertaining the amendment bill. I do not believe that it was part of what was presented today. And also the presentation that was made on the SAPO amendment bill, can it please be shared? And just an appreciation that, of course, this will be taken to our caucuses for consideration. Thanks, Chair.
Honorable Bolani, Honorable Gumbo.
Thank you, Chair, and greetings to the Minister and the honorable members and everyone on the platform. Firstly, let me start by appreciating the presentations made, Chair. Chair, just one thing on BDM. Chair, I just want to understand as to how this community awareness outreach programs are conducted or are being done. Because as one moves around, there are still people out there who are not even aware of this process, particularly people in the deep rural areas. For an example, where I'm coming from in Bembe. So if I can just get that understanding, then I think it'll be fun, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, the Honorable Kumbo. May I now call upon the Minister and the team on the basis of how you want to approach the responses. Well, I will start, Minister and Minister, or you would want to come at the end to close gaps, but it's now up to you. It's borrowed power, Minister, right? Just remember that.
Thank you.
It's just borrowed power. I'm saying, Minister, this is just borrowed power. You'll have to still come back and hand over to the chief. Just direct this point. Thank you.
Okay. I suspect there's some kind of initiation here, committee, that tends to take place in the committee. That's fine. I'm going to start, if you so indulge, ask Timakato and the Chief Executive of SAPO to deal with a lot of SAPO issues, and then probably come to BDM areas as the shop, and then the GG can come at the end, and then we come there. Maybe DM if he wants to say something. Can SAPO people, can you, Timakato and the bill, and then the CE on the number of other issues Honorable Botlana raised on the closure of post office and the commitment to service far-flung areas. Timakato and the chief executive, I don't know who comes first. Doesn't matter.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, honorable members, for those comments and inputs. And indeed, on the first one, where it talks about the closing and balancing of the post office, the CEO and the sub executives will deal with that. And then on the issue that was raised regarding what we are proposing in the bill with regards to the different services and different fees for different communities. Here we are saying that the current legislation that is there indeed provide for universal services and the charges that the South African Post Office is supposed to charge. Must be uniform, and we are saying that. This is one of the challenges that we have identified, to say that the South African Post Office continue to operate at a loss, given that they are not, irrespective of whether they are servicing a community that is well off or a community that is poorer, then they must charge the same or services to the community that is poorer or to the community that is well off, the same fees. We are saying that if we are to differentiate, this will also assist in terms of cross-subsidizing the areas that are and communities that are actually poorer in this regard. So on the issues of balancing the public mandate and competition as it were. So we're saying that this is a legislation that is governing the South African Post Office, and we have the Postal Services Act, which governs the entire postal and courier sectors, and those issues as it relates to private operators will be dealt with, and it's dealt with in that particular legislation, and it cannot be dealt with in this particular legislation, as this is the governance legislation for an entity that is the South African Post Office. But as for the other private operators, they are governed in terms of the Postal Services Act, and there's no contradiction in terms of what this amendment is proposing and what is already provided for in the Postal Services Act. There might be a need to have that one also reviewed, but currently this is more focused on ensuring that the South African Post Office has a updated legislative framework that governs the entity. So with regards to the issue of the CS report, with regards to the issue of the CS report, it was developed in consultation with the DPME. We have identified the socio-economic benefits that this amendment will actually assist with. One, making sure that we continue with the universal services obligation, as we have seen that there's still private operators we still need an entity that is entrusted with providing universal postal services and any other related services in the form of the South African Post Office, given that indeed there will be private operators who will cherry pick and operate in a more affluent and profitable areas. And if that is to happen, there's no entity that is entrusted with the universal service obligation. It will leave as many people who are unable to access or even afford the services of private operators. Hence, we have an entity that has been entrusted with a user, and also to make sure that the infrastructure is maximally utilized and provide for services to communities. We do have a CS report that outlines all those benefits and the roles and the responsibilities of different structures. We can make that also available to honorable members. I'm not so sure if DG will assist, if I might have left out any of the comments that I had to respond to.
That is okay, Demagat. Chief Executive Officer. Thanks, Demagat.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning to honorable members, honorable Chair, the honorable Minister and the honorable DM, the DG, colleagues on the call. Honorable Chair, I'd like to ask for permission to have my video switched off, please.
Permission granted, proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair. The first question we are going to deal with came from Honorable Bodlani around the closure of post offices. There's two reasons that this is happening. The first one is that the post office has gone through a process of rationalization of all its branches. And as everyone on the call is aware, that the post office has been running the business at a loss. And what we were then looking for is how is it that we could reduce the costs of running our business? That was one element. So this was a scientific study that we had done where we looked at a number of reasons and why you would necessarily close a post office. But having said that, we also need to say the following, that we have not been closing post offices in the recent past voluntarily. Those that have been closed in the recent past or even currently are offices where we are being kicked off by the landlords due to non-payment because of the financial troubles of the post office. But having said that, we have determined that with the new strategy of Post Office of Tomorrow, we will end up with a lot more and a much broader footprint of access points as the post office in the future. But for now, as we are going to prepare to get out of the business rescue, application, we are looking at what we call a minimally viable post office, where we are able to service those who require our services, but at the same time, as we will rebuild from the ashes, moving forward, we want to expand such that the post office of tomorrow does not look like the post office of today, where we are not focusing on the bricks and mortar structures that we all have everywhere. We will have a hybrid where we do have those that we have our own buildings that are owned by the post office, but in other areas, we will have points of presence where we would be able to service our customers where they are. So it's a completely new kind of thinking where you would end up with access points everywhere, but it also will be customer centric, because we need to say, what does the customer in this region require? And we ensure that we take those services to those people. So that's one element. The next point is about how is it that, I think it was Honorable Majosi, how is it that we are expanding the mandate while at the same time closing the offices? I think I've sufficiently covered that question as well. The next question was from Honorable Mulala, who was talking around, talk to us about the universal service obligation and how it is currently funded by government. Yes, it is funded by government at this point. But we have also determined that the government gives us 50% of the cost of running the business in terms of the universal service obligation. And the other 50% has always been subsidized by SAPO, which then talks to why it is that we are in the kind of financial trouble that we are. So the universal service obligation, for those who are not very clear as to what we are talking about, is where we are required by all the way from the Constitution, because everybody has a right to access to information, be it information held by government or information in general. And also that we are required, we are mandated to ensure that all South Africans are able to have access to postal services. And also we are also governed by what is called the Universal Postal Union, which also regulates that going forward. So this obligation is a very expensive mandate, almost an unfunded mandate. But the question from Mr. Honorable Malala is very clear. It says, when SAPO is able to stand on its own 2 feet and SAPO becomes self-sustainable, are you going to make sure that you then are able to cross-subsidize these less than optimum services that you guys are running? So we do want to say that that is our goal, Honorable Malala, but it does need to be supported by something very important, the enforcement of the mandate of the sub 1 kilogram parcels in this country. By law, they are supposed to be done by the post office. And that law has always not been enforced, because the reason it was put together in the first place was to ensure that SAPO is able to sustain itself by also cross-subsidizing in all those areas that it's much more difficult to reach, particularly financially. So yes, that is our idea, but in the meantime, and as we rebuild, we would require support on this, but we are also equally clear that when we implement the post office of tomorrow with some of its very exciting projects, we should be able to be cross-subsidizing and self-sufficient. Well, thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. In other words, honorable members, the key word is that we are pursuing a commercially viable SAPO and inclusive SAPO at the same time, and also stating that the universal obligation services is an area where a financial lift is critical. And then the principle of leave no one behind. Can Lishope come on the BDM? I don't know.
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister DG. Yes, committee members, yeah, I'll address the questions raised on the BDM, and then the DG will also come in. In terms of the questions raised by Honorable Bodlani on load shedding as to what is the implication there. Load shedding causes activity stoppage, and in some cases, Honorable Bodlani had delays in installations of a set-top box. There are no direct cost implications. It's more the time implication. But however, as we are highlighting in the presentation, we are mitigating this particular issue by extending the working hours and maximizing when we have energy there. And also the past week was quite good. I mean, there was a low load shedding impact and situation, I think, has improved quite significantly in the past few weeks. With regards to the clarity on SAPO logistics, what SAPO does in the project is to also distribute set-top boxes from warehouses where bulks of set-top boxes are housed to branches where the set-top boxes are issued. So there was a particular challenge in the Eastern Cape PE warehouse and branches there. Where the long haul trucks were not available. This issue has been mitigated. The department and USASA and other parties have managed to mitigate this particular issue. It's been resolved, Honorable Botlani. And then the issue of rain. The winter rain affects certain provinces. In this particular instance, it's mostly the Western Cape towards Eastern that gets a lot of winter rain. In the Western Cape, we have done quite good from a progress point of view. And also in the provinces where we are not having rain, we're continuing to maximize that. And the likes of Gauteng and the Central and the Highlands get summer rains. So whenever there is rain, yes, there could be activity slow down, but whenever the rain season goes away, we maximize during that particular period to make sure that we progress. So rain is part of the factors that is budgeted for in the project that is managed around. Then Honorable Majosi, did we not consult before? We have been consulting through and through on the issues of BDM and ASO. What is different with the recent consultation is where there would have been dissentment previously, and we are now drilling deeper into the issues that are causing dissentment and trying to foster that there be alignment and agreement towards the final position. And this is an improvement from the previous consultations, which was largely based on the meeting resolutions. This time around, we're going a little bit deeper there to try to understand the issues that are affecting and to align on those specific issues, which is giving us these gains that we have achieved in terms of alignment, Honorable Majosi. The issue of timeframes, DG and Minister will come on this. And then the issue of SAPO logistics, I think similarly as Honorable Bodlani's question, SAPO does store and deliver set-top boxes between branches. So this is where the challenge was. However, we highlighting in the presentation that it has been mitigated. So that is the role that SAPO is playing in the project there. And the issue of timelines by Honorable Malala, yeah, DG will come in on this one. Thank you. Back to you, DG.
Okay, DG, you want to come in some areas, whether it's post office or PDM, DG.
Thank you very much, Minister. And I'd like to also thank the honorable members for the questions being posed. I think this, yes, we've taken note. We will then share this with the Secretariat as of immediate, just to indicate that for every bill, SCS will have to have been conducted, and that was presented along with then the submission. With regards to the question that is being asked, maybe just to come in on the Honorable Malala asked the question of the distinction between the SAPO Amendment Bill as we're proposing it now, as well as then the Postal Services Act, and if perhaps there are any implications. There are none at the moment, and as Ms. Mojela has indicated, the main issue is just basically the compliance by all these operators who are operating in the space in terms of providing mail or parcels. And I think the regulator, ICASA, has indicated that they do have capacity constraints in as far as then affecting the Postal Services Act. And I think as the CEO of SAPO has indicated that it is the responsibility of all players within the market to ensure that there is universal services across the country and not necessarily in certain pockets or where then the markets are lucrative. So we are working with the regulator to ensure the full compliance by all the operators as well as service providers in this space. And then with regards to the issue related to the timeframe, as indicated in the presentation on the BDM, Honorable Majosi asked, the BDM, the minister will be gazetting the notice on then the timeframe for the phase one, as well as then the phase two approach. Our intent at the moment is to ensure that the spectrum is free. As you know, that this spectrum was already assigned through the auction to the mobile operators. So we would want to ensure that that spectrum is available as of July. So those would then be the main questions. And I think the issue of the logistics, as far as SAPO is concerned, has been clarified. But just to indicate that SAPO has always been one of the stakeholders in as far as then the delivery of the broadcasting digital migration. And they have been allocated 2 roles, respectively, that of registration, and then also there have been the warehousing in terms of the set-top boxes, as well as then providing the logistics in as far as then the transportation. So with the current financial constraints at SAPO, we would then have looked at other means in as far as ensuring that we take the stock that is in SAPO warehouses and deliver it to respectively to where then it is needed for installation. Those are then the questions, Minister. Thank you very much, and thank you to the honourable members.
Thank you very much, DG. Back to you, Honourable Chair. Oh, no, sorry. DM, any comment you want to throw in?
Good morning, Minister. Good morning, honourable members. I've been covered, Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear. Back to you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, and your team for the responses, questions and comments from the members. I think it's that the honourable members have been responded to adequately, and no, just mute, Minister. Mute.
Thank you, sorry.
I take it that honourable members are no follow-up questions. You've been responded to. In that score, I would want to make the following summary. That indeed from this, on the issue of the, Honourable Bodlani talks to the STEM advisory question that was not responded to. I'm not sure if the DG or Ms. Mujela would want to come back to that question on why did the STEM advisory board in that way.
Thank you, Chair. DG, do you want to deal with that?
Thank you, Minister. I'll invite the Makati as well as the Group CEO of SAPO to respond on the stamp and advisory report.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you, DG, and thank you, Honorable Chair. With regards to the Stamp Advisory Committee provisions, this is a committee that is sits within the South African Post Office, and in terms of the law, that's particular of the policy, that particular Stamp Advisory Committee is to be appointed by the minister. So there was a legislative vacuum with the current legislative framework where there's no provision for how the Stamp Advisory Committee will be appointed or will be replaced and the term of office. And the current Stamp Advisory Committee, many of them have been serving for over a very long time. Some even over 15 years to even 20 years. So we are creating a framework that will allow for representation. One, as we know that the STEMS deals with issues of national identity. Even globally, the issues of the STEMS deals with the issues of national identity and what is it that we need reflected in on the STEMS. And one might ask, why do we still have this stamp as nobody? It's kind of putting a stamp when they post or letters or something. So the stamp is part of the postal network, even at a global level, where designated operators are required to issue stamp. Last year, November, South Africa government successfully hosted the international philately exhibitions. There are still stamp collectors who collect stamps, and only designated operators globally are the ones allowed to issue the stamps.
Maybe let's deal with the advisory. Let's clarify the advisory issue. I think you have made your point there. Let's check what is the Group CEO going to. Thanks, Mujahada.
Thanks, Minister.
Group CEO?
Thank you, Honorable Minister. This is an advisory committee which has been established to advise the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies of the Post Office around annual stamp issues, whatever programs and related issues that come therefore. So usually the committee is made up of specialists in the philately sector and also representatives from the department itself, so that this can then be done. It usually is required to meet once every year. And lastly, Minister, it is also mentioned, it has a small section in the Act. So that is what the STEM Advisory Committee is all about. Thank you, Minister.
Maybe, Chair, to make the point that a number of these conventions, some of them, whilst we're in the process of business rescue, keeping the post office afloat, some of them may not be implemented during this process. We will find that at the end of June, we don't intend putting in the board immediately. We are trying to manage this situation of keeping SAPO afloat as we find a sustainable solution. Maybe I'm not sure to what extent will that assist. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think the last point begins to go to the core part of what Honorable Bulani was raising, because it related to the cost involved in putting up all such structures, given the financial position of SAP. But as I said, we would still come back to discuss once the bill is put through the process. I'm sure honorable members, as we now move forward, it's just to say, Minister, we really appreciate the report on the update with regards to BDM, which is in line with what the committee would have resolved, that you need to look at a win-win situation among stakeholders. And that win-win situation, Minister and your team, we must keep it in mind that at all times, whilst we seek to ensure all other external parties are taken care of, that we do not forget the concerns raised by Centec before you engaged in that process. One being that of the cost to keep this dual illumination on, given its obsoleteness in terms of the analog and the protection that we may not have in that regard, so that as it relates to quality of service going forward, we do not come back to haunt Centec in that regard. But secondly, that as we do everything else, it should not be at the expense of collapsing the state-owned companies, but that they are still able to play the role. So that balancing act, I think it's something we're going to keep our eye on. We also heard that you may have a staggered approach. Yes, you announced the switch off in order to release the spectrum to telcos, and that will continue probably until December next year, below the 694. I think as you do that, we should not lose our sight on transformative matters, because the department and yourselves have already reported to this committee that you are looking at the second generation policy, which seeks to address the gaps of not implementing one, which would have presented an opportunity for blacks in general, Africans in particular, in the different categories, whether I talk people with disabilities, the women, the youth, and so on. That we do not delay that aspect, because if that then goes to the December 2024, surely it will be a serious injustice in that the digital economy is the first that would say the democratic government must account fully on how it has transformed it to benefit the previously disadvantaged. So keep that, Minister, as you engage in this process, so that we don't send the wrong message that because there's been an auction and then there's money not paid, we are ready to move at that level, but the transformation agenda takes a backseat. It's very important that we keep that. So I think as you go back, we will hold you again accountable on this. I hope the project money didn't cross the line there, that by end of the month you may have announced. So we'll be looking, even if we are recess, that when the minister appears before the television, he's pronouncing the date, even if it affects next year, just to give also certainty to the country that we cannot have postponements indefinitely, but we're beginning to move in this regard. With regard to the SAPO bill, I think the committee, as requested by the presenter, accepts the introduction of this bill, and that we now put it through our processes. Our content advisors and would then work with the legal unit of Parliament to ensure that we comply in that process. Just to also respond to the point raised by Honorable Bodlani, indeed, from what we understand, the joint taking mechanism committee has put this as a Section 75 bill. And therefore our public participation would not be laborious like it would have been if it was a 76 bill. So if that's not correct, surely when we get out to the public side, those matters would be corrected, which therefore means that from here onwards, the team will have to get the ball rolling, so that whilst we are on recess, the public is also invited to participate. So as when we get back, we are able to proceed accordingly. So I'm sure they are taking note of that, so that there's no further delay. We're doing so, Honorable Minister, with an understanding that in summary, what the presentation says is that you are currently dealing with the rescue operation in rescuing SAPO from going under. But secondly, you have an approved post office of tomorrow strategy, which changes the traditional ways of operations in the post office, and therefore an enabling legislation is needed in that regard, starting with the entity, and there will be alignment with the Postal Services Act in that regard towards the end. So we want to move with speed also in that regard. The SARS report, we thought it is important. It's mentioned briefly in the presentation. I think the argument was really that if we can have that in the same way we had with the post bank, but this time we want it earlier, so that it is not a point of discussion when we are to engage at the bill. We must have looked at it, that everything else has been looked at. This includes the concerns that have been raised by the other parties and how you mitigated in each of those concerns. It's helpful, so that if those matters arise again, at least there are responses in that regard. So that will be in regard to the SAPO bill. We've noted, Minister, that in your overview, you've also spoken to the fact that the SABC bill has also gone through the necessary stages, which is something that must be put before Parliament. Again, depending on how it is tagged, the timing thereof is very important. And I'm saying this because this committee has been consistent in that if there are legislative impediments that makes the SABC not to function as it is supposed to be, this committee commits itself that those that relate to those would be addressed. If this is addressing that, I think it must be brought, Minister, the sooner the better, before parliamentary processes, so that we know the feasibility of doing that or not. Because it would not help us much that we put in bailouts and so on, when we know that legislatively you are still going to report sometimes challenges of taking up content purely on the basis that legislation is an impediment, than executives and the boards not being able to do their job. So we really need you to prioritize that. It would have been good that if it is the 6th term that really resolves this problem, so that when we hand over to the next term, they find an SABC that's really able to function. So keep that the timing is important, that we don't sit on that matter. So having said that, honorable members, like I said, that's really the summary. All other info will be sent directly to members so that it helps us with our participation. Honorable Bodlan, I think the only point I have not spoken to is the point you said you needed guidance on with regard to how the public participation would be. But my take would be that, like I said, we'll have to look first at the tagging, that it's now clarified whether 75 or 76. But I also make the assumption that we are talking about two different areas. The areas that seeks to benefit from universal service obligations, your rural areas, but as well as the urban areas. I think that differentiation comes from that end. In the urban areas where there are many options available, whilst rurals may not have. So the public participation may also seek to at least get responses from those different areas so that we have a balanced matter to look at before us in order to make proper decisions, having heard both. However, there's been caution from the strategic session of chairpersons that sometimes we all run to provinces, we do more in one province. So we also need to manage the costs in that regard. So we will look at that. So with that having been said, honorable members, as I said, we can release the minister and his team if they want to be released, so that they pronounce on the date whether it is the end of the month or not. So we don't want to hold you here. Go and implement, and we are going to hold you accountable as we go to the next item of the committee. Thanks, Minister and the team.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Long live the minister. Long live the minister.
So we now move, honorable members, to the remaining items of the committee, as would be flighted by the committee support. Am I the one who's out of the meeting?
And Chairperson continues.
No, we can hear you, Chair.
Chairperson,
Yes.
I'm gonna flight now, Chair.
Okay, I thought I'm the one who's outside the meeting. I couldn't even hear what Honorable Bodlan is saying because the line is a bit bad.
I'm saying, Chairperson, as we move to the next item, we must consider the time for the bus.
Yes, yes. Yes. You will see we will get to the Gautrain, at least you are from Ekurhuleni, you know what I mean. We'll get into the Gautrain. Honorable Mlala, we'll get into the Gautrain. So that will be the past time.
I'm just waiting for quarter-past. I'm waiting for the Gautrain now.
Can we get to Ajira?
Can you see the flighting, Chair?
I can see that. Honorable members, I've just consulted on this item. As you'll be aware, there's a referral for ICASA and the MTTA on the filling of vacancies. And this is the point we'd asked the content people to prepare and also ask different parties to confirm their members who sit in the subcommittees. The intention is really not to change this committee to be doing the work of the subcommittees. In that score, would really want to be sure that members have received. I'm saying this because in the initial item that we dealt with of the subcommittee, I heard Honorable Bodlan saying they would want the presentation shared, when in fact our understanding was that it was shared. So it may be communication issues. So I'm just saying also on this one, it was really to confirm that members would have confirmed and have received that, and that they confirm the members that are sitting in the subcommittees, so that post this meeting, there can be engagement with the subcommittee members, given that we're going to go to recess, so that as we make applications, that we can start the process, we can be able to do that. That's one. The second one is that with regards to the MDDA, because ICASA is one vacancy, MDDA had one vacancy at the time when we advertised, but from the referral, there are those that are also expiring their term of office, which is 2 by October. So in this case, we need to mandate the committee support staff to proceed with administrative processes of advertising and so on and so on. Now, once we agree on this, at least we can then ask administration for subcommittee members relevant there to receive all necessary documentation in terms of applications and so on and so on. But for the 2 vacancies, which is one from ICASA and one from the MDDA, that was advertised members, as you know, we have learned from the SABC process. Those ones, in the meantime, they were taken through security vetting and so on, and that has been done. The matter that was still pending was the completion of checking the educational qualifications, which is quite shorter than that of the security vetting side. So by the time the committees meet, we will get a detailed report on that. So I just thought in countering what Honorable Bodlani would have said qualitatively, that's the report. So we just really need parties to confirm, especially where there have been changes of members and new members have been put in, that you confirm post this meeting if you have not confirmed yet. But if you have, it means that we are giving permission for the subcommittees to proceed to look at their own program and run as such. As I check with Dr. Midubi, whether I'm summarizing what they would have looked at presenting to this committee for the few minutes that they were to take. Dr. Midubi, are you on the platform?
Good morning, Honorable Chair. Yes, I'm on the platform.
Yes. I'm checking if you have got points to add there.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. I'm not sure if the minister is still here. Good morning, Minister and DM and the rest of the colleagues. Chair, I think we have given a comprehensive summation on the matter. All that we really are waiting, for confirmation are for the various parties to confirm their members on the 2 subcommittees. We have written to both Ms. Bodlani and Ms. Mazzoni as well, for them to indicate, which of the 2 subcommittees they would want to be allocated. Having said that, Chair, for the rest of the members, it was, a little easy to try and allocate those on the 2 subcommittees. But what we are waiting for, it's for both Ms. Bodlani and Ms. Mazzoni to confirm which of the 2 subcommittees would they like to be allocated. As soon as that is done, Chair, then will then indicate how soon can the 2 subcommittees sit in to adopt the program, and would then present the guidelines of the interviews during the subcommittee first meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Midubi. Any member would want to comment? I think it's a bit clearer, and these are matters that could be dealt with after the meeting. But Honorable Bodlani, your mic is on.
Yes, Chairperson. Apologies, Chairperson. We will provide communication by the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Bodlani. So those matters then are agreed to, and that the committee support will do the administrative matters going forward. With that having been said, honorable members, we'll now go to item 3, which is the adoption of the oversight visit reports. The one of Gauteng to Free State and Gauteng to Northern Cape. So we'll start with the one for Gauteng. You will do as usually do. Sorry, it's Gauteng and Free State. Go page by page. If there's not been any corrections made, may I then get a mover and seconder to adopt this as committee report?
I move, Chair.
Honorable Mlalamus, can I get a seconder?
I second, Chair.
Honorable Kumbo seconds. Any objection in us adopting the report? Objection. So the report is agreed to. Get to the next report. On this report, I hope that has been received. I've sent a number of grammatical corrections. So for the ability, starting with the heading on top, that it's the Northern Cape province. Limpopo was once the Northern Province. But as I say, some would be just grammatical, so I won't waste the time of the committee, but from a content point of view, I think it should be fine. But I'll take members through again. You can then move. Let's go. Yeah, PSA, sorry. Yeah, I'm sure the members would agree that the name there on that day, it's, unless my notes were not correct, will be a different person. This was in SITA, but it was Kahisho Kahisi who was representing. I'm just saying for correctness. We can then move. With that understanding of the grammatical corrections to be made, can I then get the mover and seconder adoption of the report?
With those corrections made, Chair, I move.
Honorable Gombo moves. Can I get a seconder? Can I get a seconder?
I second, Chair.
Any seconds? Any objection in us adopting the report? No objection. The report is agreed to. We now move to the minutes of the 6th of June, 2023 as the next item. And I'll present the minutes of the 23rd for mover and seconder for adoption.
I move, Chair.
Honorable Bolan moves. Can I have a seconder?
I second, Honorable Chair.
Honorable Tim seconds. Any objection in us adopting the minutes? No objection, so the minutes are approved. Almost like the last item, isn't it? Committee support.
Yes, Chairperson.
So that's the last item, honorable members. Therefore, we've concluded today as the committee, and the meeting stays adjourned. Thank you.
Releboga, Chairperson.
Gautrain.
Gautrain, Chairperson.
Gautrain, get me libot lana mustubu.
Utlele umbrella mungala.
Agina yona, utlele yona, muna basara nje batoka umbrella.
Oh, Jehovah, kari muthu wa lebala.
Nake muthu wa gomera ke man. Tlaka umbrella how?
Comment support, you can cut us off. Molala may